The madness begins tonight in Dayton, Ohio, with our first four matchups, a doubleheader of games tonight there at UD Arena. DRS, of course, yesterday, a big story was Patrick Morrissey, West Virginia's governor, coming out and calling out the NCAA for the inclusion of North Carolina into the big dance and a snub of his home state, that being the Mountaineers. If we look once again at the last four teams into the NCAA tournament and the first four out, you asked for that predictive model. The NCAA does use the net rankings, something that have been there since 2019. And North Carolina, of all the bubble teams in consideration, the highest net ranking, 36th overall. Again, that's not necessarily the be-all, end-all. That's not the only metric that is used to consider these resumes, but just something to pay attention to as we try to do this moving forward.
Why don't we have one metric? Like, why is that so hard? Like, why can't you have the one computer that we all follow that gets updated? You can update it round the clock in real time as you can watch it. But why would we, though?
Because we had issues with the BCS. You have issues with everything.
Yeah, but
Donnie, Donnie, you know that.
BCS is top two. Yeah, but the BCS was top two and top. That was ridiculous. You're talking about, like, we're not really up. Like, nobody cares that UNC and West Virginia are in or out. They're not even going to fathom into anything that we're talking about. But I just would understand where, like, I don't get as upset. Like, hey, Duke wasn't on the one line. They're on the two line. It's fun to have this conversation now, but it's a simple fix. Like, nobody would be mad on the final day of the season where you had North Carolina play, understanding if they don't win, or let's just say lose by 3 points or less, they're not making the tournament. I would love that. And so would the rest of the public, as opposed to one guy who hosts the committee who's from North Carolina, act like he had nothing to do with it. And the people in the room were his friends all along, like, hey, we can't snub him here. Nobody's in here from West Virginia. Nobody's ever going to care. Hey, Bubba, man, love you. We put your team in. Great. Down the line, I'll look out for all you guys as well. Like, we don't think it went down that way, but just the way it plays out. Right. But if we had just one number to look at where we understand exactly where teams stand, phenomenal. I would love that.
Listen, and I agree in essence, we would still get mad at that regardless, because we get mad at everything, even as we try to change the process. It is that idea of debate. I am darn sure we have the graphic that shows the net ranking of the four teams that made it in to the NCAA tournament. We do not. All right, well, we'll get back to that at another time then. Let's keep moving on, because we'll preview the first four matchups in just a little bit. DRS, a weird moment yesterday, because we have all of the extra postseason tournaments, including the NIT, the CBI, now the Crown, sponsored by Fox Sports. There are some teams that want to keep playing ball, and some may be agreeing to multiple tournaments at the same time, which is what happened and then also plagued South Alabama. Richie Riley, the head coach for the Jags out of the Sun Belt, who had a great opportunity to win that league, says the NIT offered the Jaguars a spot, then rescinded the invitations later after another team, I believe UC Riverside, I will confirm, backed out of the CBI. So they invited South Alabama, and then they had to say, about that invite, we now have to take it back, putting South Alabama in a terrible spot. And as Richie Riley tweeted out in a statement, what they did to us last night is inexcusable.
It's ridiculous. And the optics, as we always talk about, are bad. But also understand this from the NIT. Like, are we saying, like, the TV sponsor is going to kill us if we don't have UC Riverside in here? There's such a big draw. Like, what was the deal? You made a mistake. You extended it. How about you just go, hey, NIT? All right, you know what? We'll just put one more team in here to balance it out and keep it simple, because I'm sure a lot of teams would like to play extra basketball in the NIT. Like, why did it have to go down this route? You extended it, and also tell the other team, hey, look, there was confusion. You didn't get it. You accepted from another league and was sort of hedging your bets on which play you would play and what's the better tournament. Nonsense. The NIT is completely at fault here. In the grand scheme of things, does it matter?
Sure.
No, it doesn't. It's just a bad look. South Alabama should be going. UC Riverside should be going to whatever tournament they were playing in. And nobody cares about it. You know why we care now? Because we found out about it. If this never happened, like, hey, South Alabama's in great, or UC Riverside's in great, nobody cares. But now we care because stuff like this goes down, and it's ridiculous.
UC Riverside was involved in both the CBI and NIT brackets that came out on Sunday night. The NIT probably should have confirmed what UC Riverside was going to decide to do before they even extended the invite elsewhere. And as we shared earlier in the show, Iona parting ways yesterday with head coach Tobin Anderson, who had just led the Gales to the MAC tournament title game, one win away from the NCAA tournament, after just his second year on campus. Of course, Tobin Anderson, well known for what he did with Fairleigh Dickinson, the upset over Purdue, now 2 tournaments ago.
Most people from Iona have no idea how good they had it. When Pitino got there, we first heard the name Iona. Now that he's gone, he's trying to get that respect back right now. You got to win at Iona. It's that plain and simple.
All right, hour number 2 next. Tonight, the 2025 men's NCAA tournament truly begins in Dayton, Ohio. First 4 matchups in a doubleheader of action between Alabama State and St. Francis, PA, the champions of the SWAC and the NAC respectively, and then our nightcap, North Carolina, an opportunity to prove it belongs in the big dance, taking on San Diego State. But before we get there, DRS, we continue to go region by region, breaking down the bracket with the big questions that need to be asked for each of our 4 components of the field of 68. Let's start in the West region, where Florida is the number 1 seed, but there are so many compelling storylines as you look up and down all 16 teams that make up this portion of the bracket on that left side of your screen. Big question number 1, because the team that is on the 8 line in the West region is the 2-time reigning national champ in UConn. How much does UConn's championship experience in this tournament really matter this time around in 2025?
I don't know. It's not like, back in the day, as we say, in the early 1990s, like, hey, look at Christian Laettner and, everybody else that surround them, Bobby Hurley. They're back again, 3 or 4 straight runs at a national championship. You don't get that. There's a couple guys left on that UConn roster, but most importantly, the coach is back and understands how to get through a tournament, how to manage expectations, probably knows exactly the schedules that work for him. Why? Because they won back-to-back and they'll probably stick to it. But also, it's the Jimmies and the Joes out there on the court. We understand this UConn team is not nearly as talented as the past 2 teams that won national championships. And you are running right into the buzzsaw that is the Florida Gators. Maybe it's somebody different, and I don't want to downplay Houston because they're phenomenal. But for me, what I've seen out of Florida, that's like, hey, Donnie, which team do you want to avoid for the longest string possible? It's the Florida Gators for me. And you're going to get them in round number 2, fresh out of the gate. That's what makes it tough. So for me, I'm not putting a lot of stock in UConn being back-to-back national champions at this point, as if that would give them a boost. Mike, frankly, I don't even know if they make it out of round number 1.
Ooh, that's a little bit intriguing in the 8-9 matchup for Connecticut, as they will get ready to take on Oklahoma. 4.5-point spread in favor of Dan Hurley's Huskies. OU, though, a team that was really proven, of course, within the SEC. I find it a fascinating conversation, DRS, because each and every year I try to remind people this is a tournament. Your 30-plus games that you played in the regular season and during a conference tournament don't really have much of an impact on your 6 games that you want to play in here in a tournament. As Donnie often says, it's not a best of 3, it's not a best of 5, it is certainly not a best of 7. It is being at your best for 40 total minutes on any given night. Of course, your resume, what you have done, the team that you have been there with, is going to lead in to how you approach every single matchup. But it is a tournament known for its madness. And yet UConn, the last 2 years in a run to a national championship, was so thoroughly dominant and impressive, it's almost like they debuted that kind of idea of this being a tournament and chaotic and changing year over year. All 12 wins for UConn the last 2 NCAA tourneys by at least 13 points. Average margin of victory of nearly 22 points per game. And yes, a lot of the cast and crew is gone from the 2 reigning national champs. No Jordan Hawkins or Adama Sanogo from 2 years ago. No Steph Castle or Donovan Clingan from this past year. No point guard extraordinaire in Tristan Newton from the 2023-24 team. But there are some familiar faces. Hassan Diarra, Alex Caravan, Samson Johnson, and of course the head coach remains in Dan Hurley. I put a little bit of stock into it for UConn. Does it change my overall outlook? I think, DRS, would I bet the Huskies at a 24-1 price to win the West region, to represent this portion of the bracket in a Final Four, to pull off the upset over more than likely Florida in the round of 32 because of what they have done the last 2 years? No, not necessarily.
Yeah, I take a look at UConn. Some people might be buying that stock. I'm short in that stock on UConn, and it will be fun. And you would from a TV perspective, though, Oklahoma doesn't move the needle for me at all. Right now, in my first bracket, I just put Oklahoma in there. And of course, today, tomorrow, you start to really study and say where are the matchups that are going to make sense. Just that first outlook where I'm just like, click, 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 click. I clicked on Oklahoma at this point. But understand this, once again, like UConn with their coach winning that basketball game and then taking on Florida because the microphones are going to be in front of them. Like, hey, what do you think about Florida coming up? And you know what he's going to do. What do you mean? We're the 2-time reigning national champions. They should be worried about us. Like, I need that in my life for the round of 32, which I'm actually hoping they get there. Now, granted, am I going to bet UConn? What's the spread going to be? Is the total going to match up? What are the vibes going to be once this game actually takes place on the 21st? We'll settle that in. And also understand this. That's a late game tip-off, too. That's that night game where it's like you wait around all day. You're watching the tournament and seeing who's going to surprise. And also, You're not even day one of the tournament here, Ben. You're day two of the tournament. So not only do you wait that whole Thursday, you wait that whole Friday with that anticipation. We'll see if UConn can get there. But UConn-Florida matchup in round number 2, everybody would sign up for that. That's great theater.
It would be incredible. Bottom half of the bracket, of course, the 2 seed in the West region. That is St. John's and Rick Pitino. DRS, in the final 2 weeks of the regular season, we played college basketball buy or sell about Rick Pitino and where he stands in the history of head coaches in college hoops. He is the only head coach ever to lead 2 different programs to a national championship. He is the only head coach ever to lead 6 different programs to the NCAA tournament. And we ask, pound for pound, is he the best head man in college basketball history? You sold that idea. I sell it as well, but I do buy the notion he is one of the greats out there. So big question number 2, I should say, for the West region. And it's a big if St. John's won the national championship this year, would Rick Pitino then be the pound-for-pound best college basketball coach ever?
No, I'm not kidding. Look, he goes 3 in a row. He would be the pound for pound. But Mike Krzyzewski's numbers on national championships and getting to Final Fours and longevity and the amount of wins he has, and also like the external things, like, I go and coach NBA players and I win gold medals as well. Like, this guy has done it also. It takes a lot to knock Krzyzewski off. And we're not downplaying Rick Pitino. One of the single best college basketball coaches that have ever done it. That's him. He's just not the overall best coach who's ever done it. That's always going to be sustained there for Krzyzewski. But also, if we are having fun, like, you do get a bump up. Like, when you go to a lowly school like Iona and bring them to the promised land when nobody else could do that, like, you do get extra credit in my book. So I do give him credit for that. And by the way, wasn't Iona College then turned into an Iona University because Rick Pitino gave it that panache and style? Like, the guy's doing bigger things. They're just winning on the basketball court.
I do believe so. What Donnie is saying right now, just so everybody knows, is a slight inside joke with DRS and his Moneyline co-host. That would be Kevin Walsh. Of course, we do give respect to Tim Cluis here on this show, leading Iona, and we give respect to Tobin Anderson, who I think got a very raw deal, despite leading the Gales to that MAC tournament title game just this past weekend. Rick Pitino did a lot for Iona, but Iona did a lot for Rick Pitino, who was not necessarily in the best of graces around college hoops until that trip in New Rochelle. There is no doubt about the success that Rick Pitino has had on a bench or on a sideline. If he were to win a national championship at 3 different schools, I think it would be very hard to say he's not the best to ever do it. Mike Krzyzewski has the pedigree because of the amount he has won at one stop. But if variety is the spice of life, and you can prove that you can win at the highest of levels in many different arenas, in many different leagues, then I do believe Rick Pitino has a bump in his overall resume.
Does the white suit come? When's the white suit come out, though? Do we wait for maybe a Florida St. John's matchup? Like, does he bust it out right away to set the tone? Or is it like, they got a tough game, and like, he comes out maybe a sweatsuit before the game, some nice kicks on, goes back into the locker room, makes that change? Like, we see college football teams and pro football teams change that jersey, like get the crowd real fired up. Like, he walks out on that court in an Elite 8 with the white suit on. Business is business at that point for Pitino.
It's a great question, DRS. Would he break it out before a Final Four appearance? Does he plan to break it out at all? It's a really good question. St. John's 18.5-point favorite in its opening round game against Omaha. Bracket by bracket, piece by piece. Next. Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid, we continue to go around region by region around the 2025 men's NCAA tournament. and ask at least one, if not a few, big question for every portion of the bracket. Let's go to the East region. The number one seed in the East region is the national championship favorite. That would be the Duke Blue Devils. So let's start with the Blue Devils, and let's start with the biggest question perhaps for Duke entering the big dance. The status of Cooper Flagg. As John Shire has said, he should be ready for the round of 64. Duke, an additional day of rest. Their first game not until Friday. Big question number one to you, DRS. How many minutes should Cooper Flagg play in Duke's round of 64 game?
Healthy, probably should play half the minutes or so. And that's really probably all you need. This isn't a game where it's like, hey, buddy, we're going to need your full 40 minutes here on this effort. So give me 15 to 20 minutes, which means first half up 15 points. Maybe get in for a little bit in the second half, but you quickly come out. Duke is a very, very strong team from top to bottom. They showed that in the ACC championship rounds without Cooper Flagg. But I need to see him on the court because if he's healthy, I need him to understand this too. He's not a 4-year college veteran. Like, hey, man, we've been to the tournament every year, have 2 national championships. I'm going to be fine. Yeah. He hasn't been to the tournament yet. Am I saying that the stage might be too big in the first round for the NCAA tournament for Cooper Flagg? No. Like, this guy went toe-to-toe as like a 17-year-old with NBA players and was out there dominating for portions. He'll be just fine, but I just need the rust factor to be down. Get that jump shot off. Run the court with the boys again. Get those vibes going so by the time you hit round 2, you're going to get an SEC team or a Big 12 team. You're going to need him full go. So as long as needed that he's healthy, I want him to knock the rust off. You don't need to overplay him at this point, but he's going to need to get his minutes.
Yeah, I would say get him out there, give him some run, DRS. Even if he was fully healthy, you would more than likely not need Cooper Flagg for a lot of the action. Duke, of course, awaits the winner of tomorrow night's first 4 game between the 16 seeds. That is American University, the champions of the Patriot League against Mount St. Mary's, the champions of the MAC. AU, 2.5-point favorite for tomorrow night's first matchup in Dayton. Duke is going to be, at least you would presume, 27, 28-point favorite for that opening round of 64 matchup. But I do think it is important to give Cooper Flagg some run. Donnie, it kind of ties into our second big question. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but it's the idea of the talented freshman here in the NCAA tournament. In the one-and-done era, teams that had an outstanding freshman class or the projected number 1 overall pick did not often go all the way to a national championship. We have seen them make a deep run in the month of March, but it's the idea of having that veteran-laden team that at the stage in a tournament known for its chaos can rest on their laurels. Are you concerned at all about Duke's lack of experience with its best players like Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, Kamen Maluach, or are you really not because there's a lot of veteran pieces in this Blue Devils team as well?
2 weeks ago, Ben, I might have a different opinion on this. Yeah, you know what? Flagg went down really late in the ACC championship game. Now they might be without him. They haven't been without him all season long. They were without him for a game where they were shocked and obviously talking about, like, I wonder if Flagg's season is over for us now. You know what they did? They rebounded against Georgia Tech and beat them. Then they went on to beat their rival without Cooper Flagg. Then they went on to win the ACC championship without Cooper Flagg. So for me, I actually think this is a bonus. Like, we separated the best player in the country from the team. You know, they responded with nothing but victories. Like, coach, we got this. Let us spin out here. Now getting your best player back, it's not going to be, I wonder how he fits back in. Like, no. Now you're ready to step up. Hey, Coop, ankle doesn't look good. Con Knipple's like, you know what? Got you. Let me go out there and fire a couple threes. I'll run this offense through me at this point. So for me, I don't look at it as a downturn at all. I look at it as an absolute positive. Now that you say this team is ready to step up without their superstar, now you get him back. Not worried about experience at all here, Ben.
Yeah, I would agree, DRS. And I think there already has been some veteran pieces that John Shire did a great job of assembling around this very talented freshman core, led by Cooper Flagg. But we've seen Isaiah Evans, the freshman, step up. And we've seen a couple of the veteran pieces in the backcourt, both Tyrese Proctor, who has been in Durham for a while, and Sion James really take the mantle. Mason Gillis was a glue guy for Purdue last year as the Boilermakers made a run to the national championship game. He is there for Duke this year. I do believe the absence of Malik Brown could be costly. His status for the entirety of the big dance a little bit more up in the air than that of the Blue Devils. And Duke, not only the national championship favorites, Donnie, now trending below a $3 price, a -140 favorite to win the East region. That would be a Final Four berth for Duke. Alabama, fresh off its first Final Four run a season ago, plus 440. They are the 2 seed in the East region. Let's get to the South region, where the number 1 overall seed resides. That is the Auburn Tigers. The number 2 seed, though, at the bottom, that would be Michigan State. And our first big question, courtesy of our producer, Joe Frizo, number 1, is Tom Izzo actually overrated when it comes to the NCAA tournament?
No, I can't go with that. Like, I know success is sometimes few and far between for some of these guys, but do you ever line up in a game? Like, honestly, like, forget my, perspective or Ben's perspective. Let's just say Michigan State winds up in March Madness, which they always do. Do you think other coaches go like, it doesn't have one of his good teams, that's going to be an easy bypass? Like, no, you expect greatness out of Michigan State, not because of the players on the team, but because of Tom Izzo. He said, well, he hasn't won a national championship in so long. It doesn't matter. That team is usually more prepared than any team on a given day-to-day basis, where if you want matchups, like, this is a tough matchup for us. You know what I want as my coach? Tom Izzo, to figure out what matchup we can try to exploit. And when you look at the actual, bracket that they're in, I love it. I think it could be a clean run because I talked about Iowa State down with a little bit of injuries here. Michigan State is one of those teams you need to watch out for, specifically Auburn, where if you handle your business, you're going to wind up in the Elite Eight against Michigan State. So for me and Tom Izzo, as much as I want to hate on Tom and he hasn't won in a long time, you got to be kidding me with that. There's no way Tom Izzo is an overrated coach for March Madness.
Yeah, get out of here with that junk. And I know Joe Frizo is doing it just to kind of entice us, but it is absolutely junk. I can understand maybe the thought. Well, you've been there for 27 consecutive years, and you only have one national championship to show for it. But this is a tournament known for its chaos and its madness. Not everything is defined by just winning a national championship when you have the proven pedigree of 8 Final Fours, the most ever for any Big Ten head coach. 56 NCAA tournament victories, the most ever for any Big Ten head coach. And I would hear it if other Big Ten programs had won a national championship. Nobody has since the Spartans did in 2000. More on the early lineup next. Portion by portion, region by region, around the men's NCAA tournament here in 2025, with the madness officially beginning on this Tuesday evening in Dayton, Ohio. So big question number 1 for the South region was about Michigan State. Frizo, I love you, but I'm going to change big question number 2 that was about Michigan's outlook, the champions of the Big Ten tournament, and as the 5 seed in this portion of the bracket, because I really think it should be about the number 1 overall seed on the top line in the South region, who is now the slight minus money favorite to represent this portion of the bracket in a Final Four. That would be Auburn at a minus 105 price. The RS dropping 3 of the Tigers' Final Four, entering the NCAA tournament. My big question for you: how concerned are you by Auburn's poor play as of late, and has it changed their NCAA tournament outlook in your mind?
No, not at all. It hasn't. It's a tough conference. It's a tough way to go through that entire season. Yes, you're going to have a lot of teams that are going to be gunning for you because you've been number 1 all season long. You have one of the best players in the country. You get the best punch from the best teams in the best conference. You're going to lose some of those games. Now, you're hoping that you had a full week off. You could decompress. Then you get into the out-of-conference slate, if you will. You should have a layup in game number 1. And then after that, you are going to get strong test and strong test. But everybody is under the same guise. It's neutral court. May the best team win. Nobody's going to have home court advantage. Not going on the road to take on Alabama in their own building. Not going on the road in the SEC to take on the Florida Gators. You're going to have an even basis, which I feel, pound for pound, depth-wise, probably Auburn is the best team overall. So for me, say, hey, would you rather be on a 10-game win streak? Of course you would. But there's also people that go, oh, that's tough. You're on a 10-game win streak. Would have been nice to get that streak over with. Like, some people actually bring up those stupid point of comments that they like to have. Auburn, for me, no issues whatsoever. Take them. Feel comfortable about it.
Donnie, I actually do believe it's a little bit surprising to see some of the numbers around Auburn. That was really their neck and neck, even in front of Duke, setting the pace for the Blue Devils in terms of those national championship odds and Final Four prices throughout the entirety of this college basketball season.
Yeah.
Auburn now the 3rd best number to win a national championship at 5-1. Now they have to fix some of the issues that have plagued them, but to Donnie's point, a road loss in a road loss in College Station against A&M in the final week of the regular season. A home rivalry game in overtime at the buzzer against Alabama. who is on the 2 line. Yep, they escaped past Ole Miss in the opening round or their opening game in the SEC tournament, and a hard-fought game against one of the best teams in the Big Dance as well in Tennessee. I still think the outlook for Auburn should be there. I still expect them to be at least in the South Regional Final. That would be an Elite Eight appearance. DRS, let's get to our fourth and final region. That would be out in the Midwest. You look at what we have here in this portion of the bracket. Scroll your eyes down to that 5-12 game. Clemson and McNeese. Of course, it has been circled by many as that classic 12-5 upset in the opening round of 64. I love the question from our producer, Joe Frieso. Big question number one. Is McNeese now too obvious of an upset pick?
I don't think so, because I think they still don't have that name recognition. Like, it used to be like, oh, St. Mary's could be an upset pick. Now, St. Mary's has a lot of name recognition now. Maybe back 20 years ago, hey, loses team Gonzaga could be an upset pick. The name recognition isn't there for McNeese to say this isn't a big-time win. And also Clemson, you're also now stressing on how actually good was the ACC this year if we think there's only 3 really good teams there and the amount of competition they played. Because it is different when you talk ACC to SEC. Like, whoa, you're getting the 12th best team in the SEC. That's still a gut punch for another team playing them because of how deep that conference was. We talk about Clemson being the 3rd best team, 2nd best team behind the Duke Blue Devils there. Now you get McNeese, and you have a head coach. It's like, guys, we've been to the tournament before. Like, I've been to the tournament before with other situations. Why can't we beat this team? Like, McNeese isn't heading into there. Man, job done. Fantastic regular season. Yeah. Now let's just go and see what happens in the tournament, because if we go home, we'll still have a party. McNeese actually believes they should win this basketball game, and why not?
Last year, a lot of this same cast and crew was a trendy 12-5 pick to beat Gonzaga. They got beat by more than 20. This year, a trendy pick as well. 62% of the money on the spread on FanDuel backing the Cowboys. But maybe they learned from the lump they took last year in the Big Dance. Midwest region odds. We'll continue to ask some questions, of course, into our third and final hour. Houston, the 1 seed in this portion of the bracket, plus 120. They are the favorites. Tennessee, the 2 seed, plus 370. Gonzaga's on the 8 line, and they've got the 3rd best price to reach the Final Four out of the Midwest region at a 9-1 number. Hour number 3 is up next, and our first 4 preview begins here on the Early Line. Welcome to hour number 3, our third and final live right here on this Tuesday morning on the Early Line on SportsGrid. He is DRS. I am BSS. We get you ready for first 4 action in the official beginning of the 2025 men's NCAA tournament tonight in Dayton, Ohio. We will look at our 2 games that we have in tonight's docket with a full breakdown of everything you need to know. And we will continue to set the stage, of course, for what we have the remainder of the Big Dance here in 2025. DRS, a jam-packed final hour ahead. We'll have our guide, TV Tom Vecchio, with his prop perspective on this Tuesday. Tom's so involved with college hoops now, even a pick for the first 4. What else can't this guy do here on the Early Line?
Yeah, put him right between Kevin and Joe Lisi on the Saturday basketball show. Be the perfect fit in there. Got some hours available you can have fun with. Understand this about the March Madness tournament starting tonight, right? The official start really is Thursday, because that's when you know where the teams are all slotted and play, and away you go. But I always get a kick out of this. It's the same feeling I have for when you watch the NFL Hall of Fame game, which is the first preseason game of the year. Like, yeah, football's back. Then they'll jump tonight, and they'll be like, I don't know about this first basketball game that I'm watching here, but I understand it's part of the hype, and I'll stick around, and maybe the second game will be better because you have better teams involved. But it is kind of funny the way it starts, because we get excited. We're like, now who's this out here? Yeah. These are college teams? Yeah, that's the feeling that you get. So good luck with that.
So, of course, there are some delineations that you will see as you make your way through a field of 68.
You know what?
And
yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Like, I just want to say this, Ben, because sometimes the thoughts pop into my head. I'm getting older. I might forget about it. Why isn't the better game on earlier? Come on, this like I'm telling you right now.
I hear it. I hear it.
If Carolina goes at 6:00 tonight, we are all watching that as the first game against San Diego State. It's a legitimate game that has the peak of the interest. And you know how this works. Game 1 will go a little bit long. Game 2 tips off at 9:30. Like, honestly, guys, what are we doing in the TV studio booth? Stop it. Stop it. All right, there you go. Say my piece.
So, listen, I completely agree. And I don't mean to make this a selfish cry by any means, but it does get a little bit difficult for people that host a morning show and have to bring you all of the recap and review of all the madness that we see into the early morning hours of a night and then turn around and do it on a morning show. So there are going to be some nights where we're not going to get a lot of sleep, and that's okay, because the one thing that is better than sleep is the NCAA tournament, and I'm very excited for the first four to begin. Yeah. I do agree, though, DRS, 6:30 p.m. tip for San Diego State and North Carolina. I am all for it. The two games tonight in Dayton, as we will detail. Our first matchup is a battle of 16 seeds and automatic qualifiers who won their conference tournament crown for that automatic bid. Out of the SWAC, it is Alabama State taking on the champions of the NEC, St. Francis, PA. And then, of course, the matchup to be the true 11 seed in the South region, North Carolina and San Diego State. Two of the Final Four teams into the field of 68. A lot to get to here, but we wanted to hear from the people, Donnie. Who's going to win tonight? Who is going to officially get credit for an NCAA tournament victory and march on to the round of 64? That was the question for all of you, and Fade the Public. Not incorporating the spreads, the Hornets of Alabama State, 3.5-point favorite. North Carolina, now a 4.5-point favorite against SDSU. So just give me a money line parlay. Who will win tonight's NCAA tournament first four games? We gave you all of the options, of course. In the public, in large part, DRS, back in North Carolina and Alabama State. The two favorites tonight at more than 43% of the vote. San Diego State and Alabama State, second most votes at 24%. Which way did DRS vote in this Fade the Public poll?
Yeah, the public, going with the public here and back in the public. That's UNC and Alabama State, 43%. But I went San Diego State and Alabama State because only 24% going with that. I just look at it like this. Like, if you're truly fading the public, like we, talking about the public, didn't think UNC was going to get a bid. Now that they did get a bid, we, the public, are like, yeah, easy victory in round number one, because apparently that's the way it's being bet right now at the FanDuel Sportsbook. I can't even believe we questioned UNC even getting in there. UNC should be in a Final Four team the way we're betting them tonight against San Diego State. So I just went double against the public by saying, you know what, Alabama State, slight public side tonight. San Diego State, completely not the public side tonight. That's the way I went. Like, how did we be, not saying we're turncoats, but how did we, keep Carolina out? Like, you see that meme? It's like, they take the sip of drinks, like, and then they switch their face, like, they don't like it so much. That's UNC. That's what we're doing here today. Yeah, come on.
Doing this. There is no doubt. When you look at the public betting information that we have, those stats on the FanDuel Sportsbook, 76% of the money on the spread is backing Carolina. That number yesterday in the low 80s of the percentages we saw in terms of your spread betting and the money that we were seeing on the FanDuel Sportsbook. There has been a little bit of buyback in the Aztecs. It is still a 4.5-point number, but when you and I were live together in studio yesterday, it was a 3.5-point spread. Overwhelming public sentiment backing UNC, which is interesting because there was overwhelming public sentiment that did not believe the Heels were deserving of being the Final Four team, the final team in to the NCAA tournament field of 68. Here is the positive for North Carolina. They understood the task at hand down the home stretch of the regular season. They would have some quad one opportunities against Duke. Outside of that, they could not afford a loss. And to UNC's credit, they didn't get that quad one win outright against the Blue Devils, but they also did not pick up another bad loss. 10 games, including both against the Blue Devils in the regular season finale, and of course in the ACC tournament semifinal. In those 8 other games, DRS, a perfect 8-0 for Carolina, covering the number in 7 of those 8 wins. So you can feel confident that if it's not against Duke, or maybe Clemson or Louisville in the ACC, or another quad one team, UNC is going to handle business. And I will say this, the net ranking's not really a part of our conversation now into the big dance, but San Diego State currently number 52 in the net. This is a neutral court game in Dayton, Ohio, which means it's technically a quad 2 game for North Carolina. Plan accordingly.
But also understand this, like sometimes you used to get the bump of, well, we're in the ACC. We're going to get the benefit of the doubt. We play great competition all the way through. The top 2/3 of this division, let's just say, or conference would be the best in the country. You go to Ken Palm's metrics here, Ben. I see number 5, it's the ACC. Who's right behind them? The Mountain West Conference. So you can't even take a look at, well, Carolina's a better team, better pedigree, better league. Not necessarily at this point. Right on the heels of that conference where they were absolutely fantastic this regular season, playing quality opponents on a night-to-night basis for the most part here. This isn't going to be a surprise. And this isn't a San Diego State that, hey, never heard of them before. This team's been prowling around in competition and doing quite well in the NCAA tournament. It's not as if like, hey, first time in 20 years we're making a tournament appearance. That's not SDSU. Yep.
No, it's certainly not. San Diego State played in the national championship game in the 2023 Big Dance. North Carolina, as an 8 seed, played in the national championship game in 2022. In a first 4 matchup, we have 2 teams that played in 2 of the last 3 NCAA tournament title games. That is pretty impressive stuff. Now, the Mountain West has struggled at times throughout the NCAA tournament, and there's been this perceived notion that the ACC has had many down years in college basketball. Once the pinnacle of a conference in college hoops, the last few years, the ACC has not been as great throughout the regular season, has not had as many bids to the Big Dance, and yet when they get to the NCAA tourney, they make the most of it. NC State, a Final Four team a year ago. Of course, we had North Carolina and Duke both get to the Final Four 2 seasons ago. The ACC has performed well, even with the perceived weakness in their conference slates the last few years. The 2025 men's NCAA tournament officially begins tonight in Dayton, Ohio. We've got a doubleheader of first 4 action. So let's get you set with every single angle that you need for tonight's beginning in the Big Dance. DRS, we start with the nightcap in Dayton. 2 of the Final 4 teams into the field of 68, including the last team into the Big Dance, a controversial selection in the field of 68. That would be North Carolina. And yet, Carolina, who many thought was not deserving of an NCAA tournament bid, 4.5-point favorite against San Diego State. It is our nightcap tonight in Dayton, Ohio, our second of 2 first 4 games. Total stands at 142 and a hook. 4.5-point spread in favor of the Eels. That total at 142.5. DRS, where do you begin your breakdown of this matchup tonight between the Aztecs and the Tar Heels?
Yeah, take a look at the North Carolina offense versus the San Diego State defense. The one thing that we always know, the calling card for San Diego State is not an up-tempo offense. It's playing really good defense, 13 in the country in efficiency. Now, sometimes you say, well, Donnie, how does this differentiate from you taking a look at like versus like competition, which means we play in the same conference? We just talked about just a short while ago where you're looking at both of these conferences back-to-back here. So it's not as if, well, how do I compensate for a team that plays in the SEC versus a team that plays in like the NEC at that point, right? It's like, wow, can I really trust that they're all that efficient? Now, that efficiency goes out the door when the 5 guys on the other team are so much better than you. Hey, I'm used to getting off my 3-point shot. Now I can't. Yeah, of course, because the other guys are 6'5", you're 6'2", and are faster than you than your guard play at this point. So that's what I'm trying to factor in, because Carolina does have a very good offense. The one thing that we do know is San Diego State's defense, Ben, is good. It is efficient, but it will let you shoot the 3-point shot, but will defend the heck out of it. You're taking a look at a team 354th, Ben, in the nationally at allowing you to shoot the 3-point shot. So if you're like BYU, hey, man, sign me up at this point. That's not necessarily Carolina, but they will defend it. Also understand this. I don't know if it's me just watching like sometimes the basketball court in Dayton. I remember a couple years where the nets looked like they were really short and the rims maybe weren't all that forgiving. I always take a look at that. So if I say to myself, a team that's going to let you shoot the 3-point shot and defend it where that could be the majority of your shots, I usually automatically lean towards that team because San Diego State's offense isn't overly relying on the 3-point shot. And it's not crazy statistics from UNC from the 3-point line. So as crazy as it sounds, like UNC is a very good offensive team. And San Diego State will let you shoot the 3-point shot. But again, that's not really the calling card of UNC. They'll knock down maybe some 3-point shots, but you talk about that stingy defense, Ben, look at the point distribution. 360th in the nation at allowing you to score inside. That means those points are hard to come by. So point number 1 is we'll give you the 3. We don't think you'll knock them down, but if you want to come down low here, we'll defend the heck out of it. I like San Diego State in the points tonight. I just think that matchup, UNC's offense versus San Diego State's defense, that's where it's going to be won. On a neutral court, I always lean defense.
And this line opened at 3.5. It is now 4.5 in favor of Carolina. We have told you more than 70% of the money when it comes to the spread bets backing the Heels tonight. And Donnie, you look at the four factors, right? You look at the style of plays that we see on Ken Palm. So some of it is cause and effect, right? San Diego State has a lot of length. We'll talk about the Aztecs defensively in just a moment. Because it is difficult to score against SDSU in the post and near the rim, obviously then opponents are going to have to hoist more threes than maybe they would like. 47% of the opponents taking or of the opponents' field goals this year from deep against San Diego State this season. Some of that blends into each other. It's not like San Diego State doesn't guard the three-point line just because of how difficult it is to score near the rack. That allows more threes to be taken against SDSU. Part of that reason, again, is because of the length. Jared Coleman-Jones down low for San Diego State. And a big addition for the Aztecs. Magoon Gawath, the 7-foot freshman, is back tonight for SDSU. He has not played since the end of February. He was not there in the opening round defeat in the Mountain West tournament in Las Vegas last week for Brian Dutcher and his team against Boise State, which makes things difficult for UNC as they try to attack the rim and could lead to more mid-range or even deep-range threes from beyond the arc. 13th most efficient defense, that is San Diego State nationally. 22nd most efficient offense, that is UNC nationally. That is kind of the crux of this matchup, really, as you break it down.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you're trying to manage because we don't have really a backlog. Like, hey, man, remember last 2 times North Carolina played Duke, or last 3 times, we should say, since they played in the ACC? You're taking a look at like versus like opponents when there really isn't any like versus like opponent, but you can take stock in, again, 2 really good conferences where you're trusting the depth of these 2 teams. We always thought San Diego State would probably get in. They did. North Carolina was a little bit more of a question mark, but here we are on a Tuesday night in Dayton, and I'm just going to rely on it. I know Tom Vecchio was talking about, I think, game number 2, the under in the first half. All these games in Dayton, for me, I'm probably looking more towards the unders than I am for the overs at this point. So we have some time today to figure it out because this doesn't start till 9 o'clock tonight. Maybe even looking at like a team total to the under. Is that the better wager to go with UNC? We know they like to get out and run, but at the same time, San Diego State does play defense, and you take a look at the average length of possession on defense for San Diego State, 342nd, which means you're going to have to earn every point you get. And it's a great point you bring up, a 7-footer added to the equation where it's not so much that the guy can be dynamic, but RJ Davis, hey, let me just take it to the rim. Oh, now I can't do that kick out for a 3 and the threes aren't working. Advantage San Diego State. We'll see how it plays out, but this is a good basketball game with, I think, a pretty clean handicap on not just saying like, hey, it's a coin flip. There are some intricacies that I think you could take advantage of tonight.
Of course, San Diego State made the national championship game just 2 big dances ago, coming up short against UConn, then had to play Dan Hurley's Huskies last year in the Sweet 16 as well. A lot of those guys no longer there. Nick Boyd is. He will lead kind of that backcourt for Brian Dutcher and the Aztecs tonight. Of course, nobody has played more ACC hoops in their careers than that of RJ Davis. He is the veteran leader for Hubert Davis and this team tonight. Elliot Cadeau, a really talented point guard. Facilitation is what he does best for the Heels. You would kind of give the post presence the edge for San Diego State, the backcourt the edge for North Carolina. SDSU DRS, 4 times in non-conference play against 4 quality opponents, all in the big dance, booked as an underdog. 2-2 both against the spread and straight up. Those 2 outright victories for San Diego State as a dog early in non-con play over Creighton and Houston. There is some quality metrics for San Diego State. There is not really that for North Carolina. And again, that is the argument against the Heels into the big dance. They are 1-12. 1-12 in quad 1 games this season. We don't really use quad 1, 2, 3, or 4 anymore for the NCAA tournament, but just based on technicality, San Diego State checks in at number 52 in the net rankings entering tonight. Neutral floor game. This would be a quad 2 game for UNC. Here's where I will give Carolina some credit. Donnie, if you want to argue the idea of battle tested, it's one thing to play a bunch of very difficult teams It's another thing to win those games against that very tough competition, something UNC did not do. But the Tar Heels, against competition they were expected to beat, they made good on those numbers, and they looked impressive in doing so. Final 10 games for UNC this season. 2 against Duke, regular season finale, ACC tournament semifinal. The other 8, UNC won, and they covered in 7 of those 8 victories. The public expecting Carolina to do that tonight in the first 4.
Yeah, and no doubt about it. They're betting accordingly at this point, and it's certainly going to be a heavy favorite team just because of the name itself, like the Yankee tax that you get in Major League Baseball. But understand this, too. It's not as if you can just go with the old adage, hey, man, we play in the ACC, as I said, versus the Mountain West Conference. That's not the case here. Like, San Diego State had an unbelievably tough schedule with a lot of tournament teams in that division where they can go toe-to-toe. And as you pointed out, beating Houston and beating Creighton, they're not too big for the stage here. They're used to this stage. No. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. That's a quality game on night number 1 of the NCAA tournament for sure.
A national championship run for Brian Dutcher and the Aztecs 2 tournaments ago. A second weekend appearance in the Sweet 16 last year. The first game of the big dance. The first in the first 4. That's next. Our first of the first 4 tonight in Dayton, Ohio, as we continue to break it down and preview this matchup here. The champions out of the SWAC, Alabama State, into the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2011. And the unlikely title winners in the NEC. That was St. Francis, PA, pulling off the upset in the tournament final against Central Connecticut. The Blue Devils of Central Connecticut entered that matchup winners of 14 consecutive games, the nation's longest active win streak. The Red Flash and Frankie the Friar had opposite ideas. So St. Francis into the big dance for the first time since 1991 as a D1 program for more than 7 decades, just the second ever birth in the big dance. In DRS, St. Francis will be the 20th ever team since the field expanded in 1985 to reach the men's NCAA tournament with a sub-500 record. The Red Flash are 16-17 straight up. The Hornets of Alabama State, 3.5-point favorite tonight against the Red Flash of St. Francis, PA. Our total stands at 138.5. How do you see this matchup playing out between Alabama State and St. Francis, PA?
Yeah, Alabama State probably more deserving of a bid. Why? Because it was an automatic bid. Same thing with St. Francis. But when you take a look at St. Francis, it's like usually you come into this, okay, they won their conference, which probably means they were the best team in their conference. St. Francis wasn't. And again, it's a one-game playoff, and credit for them for winning it. But you say, what do they do well on offense? Nothing. What do they do well on defense? They defend the three-point line, but outside of that, nothing really as well. And they turn the basketball over at an incredible rate. So when you're looking at a conference, and I know you're going to bring this up, and you brought it up early, and you're right. Like, Alabama State doesn't turn the basketball over. St. Francis does. Like, Alabama State wants to shoot the three-point shot. St. Francis will let you shoot the three-point shot. It just feels like it's a better fit for Alabama State against St. Francis. Understand this again. Both of these teams aren't used to being on the national stage and having the spotlight here on an individual, basis and just playing on a neutral site court in Dayton. So I do believe the under is probably the better play in this one. But I got to tell you, trying to take the points and pray, right? Like, you really would be doing that with St. Francis because there's not a lot to love. They don't get to the free throw line. They don't rebound. They turn the basketball over. They're okay shooters. Is that enough to sort of carry you through? When anything can happen in a neutral court site game, I understand that. But Alabama State at least has a defined footprint. Is they're bad on offense, but at least they'll get their shots off, and they'll take three-point shots, and it fits that way. So if I'm willing to lay the points, it's probably with Alabama State, and then they don't shoot the free throw all that well to sort of close out the 3.5. You get what you get. Like, we're going to get one good game, we think, tonight. You're going to get one bad one to start it off, and it is what it is.
Yeah, and that's the way of it. But I do want to say the atmosphere and the opportunity for these two programs to be on this national stage, to have a standalone window to begin the big dance, that's a really cool thing. I used to be in the camp that I thought automatic bids, automatic qualifiers for the NCAA tournament should not have to play in first 4 play-in games. They should get the full experience of being involved in the round of 64, the travel to the site, to be around all of the other NCAA tournament teams in that opening weekend pod, even if they were to be ousted in the opening round. But then when you really dive into it, the financials of winning an NCAA tournament game are those that you would really never want to pass up. So that financial opportunity plus the window and the atmosphere of what that can mean for your program, I'm now kind of bought all in on even 16 seeds, even champions of a conference tournament having to play on the opening night of the big dance. And I do believe the Hornets and the Red Flash will relish that opportunity. To Donnie's point, one of the key matchup trends you should know for this matchup, Alabama State does not turn the basketball over. They have the 5th best turnover rate in all of college basketball. Out of 364 D1 teams, 5th best turnover rate. St. Francis, PA, bottom 45 in terms of giving you the opportunity to take the ball away. And Donnie, they often get it stolen away. Bad passes, putting the ball in harm's way, and allowing the other defense to shine. They also let you shoot it from 3. Opponents' shots and field goal attempts, more than 43% against the Red Flash. From deep, nearly 43% from Alabama State from three-point range. The metrics do favor Alabama State. They are a 3.5-point favorite in this matchup. Now, St. Francis pulled off the upset over Central Connecticut in the NEC final. The NEC is not one of our best conferences of the 31 that compete at the D1 level. In fact, it is second worst. The worst conference overall based on the net ratings from Ken Palm, that would be the SWAC, of which Alabama State is the champion. And these are our 2 lowest rated Ken Palm teams into the field of 68. The Red Flash, the worst at 311 out of 364. But again, St. Francis, PA understands this. They have a losing record overall. But the opportunity to excel on the big dance, big stage tonight, that should be one that we enjoy, I think, to see to start us off in Dayton.
Exactly. And just to get into, again, some of the numbers here that make sense, we talked about the turnovers, but also fitting like a glove, right? St. Francis turns it over a ton. Almost 20% of their possessions don't end up in an actual shot. You take a look at Alabama's defense, 19% of the transactions they have on defense, they turn it over. So that's a good match. And then you take a look at Alabama State, where St. Francis doesn't really turn you over all that much, and they don't turn it over. That could be a key because sometimes you could take a look at it, Ben. It used to be like the old Davidson versus VCU days. Like Davidson won't turn the basketball over. VCU's the best in the country at turning it over. Who's going to win that battle? It seems like Alabama State wins both on offense and defense in that battle, which could be just enough. Look, if you're going to give somebody 6 or 7 more shots than the other opponent just on turnovers, that's key in a game where you're separated only by 3.5 points in the odds market.
And the total is 138.5, right? We're not expecting a very high-scoring affair on either side. Donnie, both of the games tonight in Dayton in the first 4, hugely impactful for the South region. Auburn is the number 1 overall seed on the 1 line in the South region. They await the winner of the matchup between the Hornets and the Red Flash. The winner of UNC and San Diego State becomes the true 11 seed in the South region, an opening round of 64 game against Ole Miss. Slingshot effect? Perhaps, but the first 4 began in 2011. Every year we have seen the first 4 in the NCAA tournament, with the exception of 2019, a team that was victorious in Dayton also won at least 1 game in the round of 64. Something to know as we enter tonight. DRS, any closing thoughts before we send you to the money line, my friend?
Looking forward to it, ready to go. And by the way, the next money line we'll have game number 2 in Major League Baseball as well. 6:10 start once again on a Wednesday morning. How about that?
And on the early line even. DRS, we'll talk tomorrow. More on the early line up next.